For us here tonight, 2 weeks ago today was the start of the blizzard that would become one of the worst storms, if not the worst, we've ever seen here. 42 people died, 30 of them in Buffalo, and so many more dealt with a frustrating mess for days after the flakes stopped falling. Buffalo Common Council member Mitch Nowakowski sent a letter to the mayor and Common Council today calling for a panel to investigate what went wrong in the city's response and what needs to change. And joining us live now here in studio is the council member who represents the Fillmore District. We appreciate you coming in to talk about this. 5 pages long. I think I counted 9 bullet points or headlines. What are the two biggest things that you want to see addressed as we move forward?
Yeah, moving forward, we really need to work on our coordination with county, state, and federal resources. As we know, the storm of this magnitude and the volatility of weather, the city of Buffalo cannot address this just by itself. So when we have severe weather, we need to really have an emergency response to be able to deploy not only equipment but resources to neighborhoods to be able to really address, large concerns that affect the quality and welfare and ultimately livelihood of people in the city of Buffalo.
Leading up to this storm, we were covering quite a bit, the Common Council putting together this snow plan. Why wasn't any of this in that? And what would you say to people who are watching who say, well, why didn't the council think of this stuff when you were developing a plan?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And what I've been telling folks is, when you go through life, you often have to deal with really difficult experiences, but it's incumbent upon us to then look back at those experiences and see what we've learned from them. We've never dealt with a blizzard, at least in my lifetime. I wasn't around for the blizzard of '77, so we were able to really get a hands-on grip of what the needs were. And Michael, I spent my time during the blizzard answering hundreds of calls on my personal cell phone, sitting at my kitchen table, really working through being able to coordinate the National Guard to county, state, and city resources to make sure we can get into neighborhoods to really have an emergency response to deal with the needs. I had constituents giving birth in their living room. Yeah. I had constituents who were getting neighbors out of houses where they were found disorientated. So having a strong emergency response is critical, and that's why Councilmember Scanlon and I are calling for the creation of an emergency manager. We see in towns like Hamburg and in Amherst, smaller municipalities, who have a full-time emergency manager who is equipped and really in charge of being able to not only coordinate responses, but deploy them during and after natural disasters.
The mayor has called to create this position of a fleet manager. Would that money be better spent on what you're talking about here with an emergency manager?
I believe so, and it's been reported and shown that through departments like BPD, Fire, and Department of Public Works, there already is someone that really works as a fleet manager within those respective departments. So we need those fleet managers to coordinate with one emergency manager who can really coordinate all of that fleet and deploy it when it's needed, but also work to, get better training equipment, write grants for better, equipment that could be in BPD and in the fire department, and really propel us to have the best response we have possible, because the better the response, Michael, the more lives we save during storms.
No, there are issues with some of the equipment with the fire department. I think hard to argue with that. I've got only about 30 seconds left, but how does what you're calling for here match up with what New York University is doing? There are these outside experts who are going to come in and kind of look at everything and see where the deficiencies are. How does this work with that?
Yeah, so it's good that we have someone that's third party that's able to look at this, but the Buffalo Common Council is the oversight, fiduciary, and policy-making body, and we need to have extreme inclusion in that assessment on how to move forward, and we need to be included in that after-action report, because it's incumbent upon the Buffalo Common Council to allocate resources and where we find deficiencies.
Buffalo Common Council member Mitch Nowakowski, thanks so much for coming in. This is a story we're going to be obviously continuing to cover. We'd love to have you back and see how this progresses.
Thanks for having me.
All right.